Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump lashed out at European countries for rejecting help to safeguard the Strait of Hormuz and said Washington no longer needs help from other allies, including South Korea. Two of Iran's most senior security figures have been killed in recent airstrikes by Israel, further raising tensions in the region. Iran's new supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei has vowed revenge and has reportedly rejected international calls for de-escalation. South Korea added 234,000 jobs in February, marking the fastest on-year growth in 5 months. But despite the overall rise in the labor market, the youth unemployment rate reached its highest level for the month in 5 years. We begin this morning with U.S. President Donald Trump showing a furious reaction to the rejection and reluctance from ally countries to send naval support to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, a senior official in his administration has resigned over Washington's conflict with Tehran. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump lashed out at allies after many refused or held back on his call to send warships to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. Posting on Truth Social, Trump declared America no longer needs or desires NATO's assistance, and likewise Japan, Australia and South Korea. He stated the U.S. does not need the help of anyone, saying it is, quote, by far the most powerful country anywhere in the world. The outburst came on Tuesday after Trump had spent the previous days pressing allies to send their navies to the Strait of Hormuz, after Iran effectively closed the waterway in retaliation for U.S.-Israeli attacks.
So, I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake, and I've long said that, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
France has drawn the clearest line. President Emmanuel Macron said Paris would never take part in operations to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in the current context, stressing that France was not party to the conflict. Australia's Transport Minister Catherine King bluntly said Canberra will not be sending a ship to the strait. Japan was more guarded but no more willing. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said there had been no decisions whatsoever on dispatching escort ships, and that Tokyo was still considering what it could do within its legal framework. South Korea has said it did not receive an official request, while its lawmakers have indicated a deployment would require legislative approval. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates has shown more openness. A senior Emirati official said on Tuesday that Abu Dhabi could join an international effort to secure the strait. Split reactions are also emerging from within Washington. On Tuesday, Joe Kent, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, resigned over the war, becoming the first senior Trump official known to quit over the conflict. In his resignation letter, Kent wrote that Iran posed no imminent threat to the U.S. and said he could not support the war in good conscience. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And Israel says it has killed 2 of Iran's top security figures in fresh airstrikes as tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate. Iran's new supreme leader is vowing revenge and rejecting calls for de-escalation. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Israel says 2 of Iran's most senior security figures have been killed in recent airstrikes, marking a major escalation in the ongoing conflict. According to Israeli officials on Tuesday, Ali Larijani, described as Iran's top security official, and Gholam Reza Soleimani, head of the paramilitary Basij force, were killed in separate U.S.-Israeli strikes. Iran has since confirmed the deaths of both men. The Israel Defense Forces said its Air Force carried out what it called a precise strike near Tehran on Monday night that killed Larijani. Israeli officials claimed that following the assassination of former Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei in late February, Larijani had effectively taken a leading role in directing Iran's military response against Israel and its regional allies. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps also confirmed the death of Basij commander Gholam Reza Soleimani, describing him as a veteran military leader who played a key role in past conflicts, including the Iran-Iraq War, and in mobilizing public support for the regime. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the killings are part of a broader campaign to weaken what he called Iran's terror-spreading leadership, warning that Israel still has many more surprises ahead.
There is cooperation between our air forces and naval forces between me and President Trump and his people. We will assist both with indirect attacks, which generate immense pressure on the Iranian regime, and with direct actions. There are many more surprises.
Meanwhile, Iran's newly appointed supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, has reportedly rejected international calls for de-escalation. A senior Iranian official said he is demanding that both Israel and the United States be brought to their knees before any negotiations can take place, signaling a hardening stance as tensions continue to rise. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, following reports that the U.S. is moving parts of a terminal high-altitude area defense system from South Korea, a senior Pentagon official said the ability to redeploy defense assets quickly is a tremendous strength. Speaking at a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing on Tuesday, Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, Michael Duffy, addressed concerns that parts of the system could be moved to the Middle East amid the ongoing war with Iran. He said the U.S. prioritizes sending military resources to areas of the most urgent need, but declined to comment on how long any specific redeployment might last. He also reaffirmed Washington's commitment to its security alliance with Seoul. With the war in the Middle East now into its third week, President Lee Jae-myung has urged his officials to prepare for the worst-case scenarios from the prolonged conflict. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Preparing for the worst-case scenarios stemming from a possible prolonged conflict in the Middle East. That was the message from President Lee Jae-myung on Tuesday as he presided over the weekly cabinet meeting at the government complex in Sejong, noting that oil prices have started to stabilize since a price cap was implemented. But he warned of further uncertainties.
중동 상황이 당초 예상을 뛰어넘는 방향으로 확대되고 있습니다. 현재와 같은 양상이라면 잠시 진정됐던 석유 가격이 다시 불안정해지고 민생 전반에 가해질 충격도 커지게 될 것 같습니다.
He called on officials to supervise prices on site to make sure the price cap is actually reflected at the gas pumps, as some cases have been reported where oil refiners and gas stations raised prices despite the new rule.
We will impose strict punishment on any violation of the oil price cap and the false reporting of supply prices.
On top of that, President Lee emphasized the need to find alternative energy supplies.
UAE에서 추가 원유를 확보했던 것처럼 우리의 외교 역량과 자산을 총동원해서 안정적인 추가 대체 공급선 발굴에 총력을 기울여야 되겠습니다.
He mentioned the possibility of temporarily limiting the use of private vehicles and placing export controls on certain items if necessary. He also instructed the cabinet to swiftly organize an extra budget.
전쟁 추경이 신속하게 집행될 수 있도록 다각도로 노력해 주시기 바랍니다. 결국은 소득 지원 정책을 안 할 수가 없을 것 같은데 이번 추경을 한다면 그럴 때도 아주 지방에 더 대대적으로 할 수 있게.
Balancing out development across all regions of the country was also on the agenda as the meeting took place in the administrative city of Sejong. Additionally, the cabinet approved a bill aimed at implementing U.S. investment worth $350 billion, for which a strategic investment corporation will be established. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
So U.S. President Donald Trump now says Washington doesn't need help after most allies rejected his calls to secure the Strait of Hormuz. And this comes as global uncertainty escalates, with the U.S. even seeking to delay Trump's visit to China, which was initially set for 2 weeks from now. For more, we're joined today by Brian Myers, Professor of International Studies at Dongseok University. Professor Myers, thanks for coming on today.
My pleasure.
So, after Australia, Germany, and Japan said they weren't planning to participate, President Trump even said it was actually a loyalty test. So, if the U.S. doesn't need help protecting the waterway, what's really behind Washington's move?
Well, I think that saying that his request was just a loyalty test may be just a way of saving face now that his administration has been humiliated by the lack of a response from any of America's allies. But as some South Korean experts were saying about this all along, this may be more about financial burden sharing than about military cooperation anyway. So now the Americans have asked for help. The allies have refused to provide it. And now President Trump can say, well, all right, the least you can all do now is pay a lot more for your own defense. But, the president has been contradicting himself so often over the past few days, and sometimes in the same speeches, that it's hard to tell when he means what he says.
I see. And how should South Korea respond in this situation? How realistic, is it for South Korea to provide support and safeguarding the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, the alliance between Korea and America rests on a defense treaty, not an offense treaty. So it doesn't apply if either America or Korea starts a war. So I think South Koreans do not need to feel like they're being bad allies here if they're not enthusiastic about rushing into the Strait of Hormuz, which would be, I think, a very reckless thing for the government to do. Now, in the past, during the two Gulf Wars, South Korea managed to keep the Americans happy without making enemies in the Middle East. And perhaps that can be done this time, too. For example, South Korea might be able to dispatch non-combat forces to serve in some kind of auxiliary function somewhere out of harm's way. But the National Assembly would have to approve of such a thing. And my sense is that the ruling party would probably vote against it at this point.
Right. And while that's happening in North Korea, the regime fired ballistic missiles over the weekend with Kim Jong-un and his daughter Chue reportedly overseeing that test. Is this another move to publicly signal that Kim Jong-un is likely to become the next leader?
Well, I think that by keeping her in the public eye at events like this, the regime really just wants to make very clear that North Korea will remain a de facto monarchy one way or the other. So the leader is saying, in effect, not just to his own people, but also to the outside world, don't get any strange ideas about regime change because power will stay in this family even after I go. That's the main signal. But this does not necessarily mean that Kim Joo-ae has to be the successor, because for all we know, the leader has a son somewhere who he wants to keep out of the limelight for a few more years, perhaps for security reasons. But one way or another, the Baekdu dynasty seems likely to continue into the next generation.
I see. And North Korea also says its newly elected Supreme People's Assembly will convene its first session this weekend for a constitutional revision. What should we expect?
Well, the Constitution is less important in North Korea than the charter of the Workers' Party. And that charter was amended last month to enshrine Kim Jong-un's new doctrine that South Korea is not a partner on the road to unification. It's a hostile state, and it must be treated accordingly. Now, an amendment in that vein was already made to the Constitution, but everybody now expects a much more thorough revision of it, including a very clear definition of what North Korea's borders are. And this is relevant to South Korea because if the North says our southern border is the DMZ, some people here may start calling for South Korea's constitution to start saying that this country's northern border is the DMZ, which would be a departure from Article 3, which now says that the Republic of Korea extends over the entire peninsula. So it's something that I think a lot of South Korean people are keeping an eye on.
Right, and North Korea is, still largely closed to tourists, but passenger train services between Beijing and Pyongyang were put back on track last week for the first time in 6 years, and direct flights are also expected to resume soon. What does this tell us about relations between North Korea and China?
Well, it doesn't tell us a whole lot, but I think it's enough to put to rest any rumors that China and North Korea are squabbling or on bad terms. Western media have, for a few years now, been quite eager to play up the disunity inside the so-called authoritarian camp of Russia, China, and North Korea. But these restored connections give the lie to that, I think. On the other hand, Kim does not seem very eager to let large numbers of Chinese tourists back into the country, whereas 5,000 Russian tourists visited North Korea last year. So my sense is that all three countries, Russia, China, and North Korea, are getting along fine, but the North is likely to continue prioritizing its relationship with Russia.
I see. All right, Professor Myers, thanks for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Employment in South Korea saw its biggest gain in 5 months in February, with the number of people with jobs up to 234,000 on year. Data released by the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Wednesday showed total employment reached 28.41 million. However, employment among young people fell by 146,000, raising the unemployment rate for that group to 7.7%, the highest for any February in 5 years. Employment among those aged 60 and older rose by 287,000. Health and social welfare services led the increase, while the manufacturing and construction sectors remained weak with continued declines. Total unemployment rose 0.2 percentage points to 3.4%. A Korean flag that contains the spirit of restoring independence has returned to its home, where a new museum has opened in South Korea's southern Namdo province. Our Cha Yun-kyung has more.
From Naju, Jeollanam-do province, where General Kim Cheon-il first raised a righteous army during the Imjin War, to the Seokdae-do battlefield in Janghung, the site of the Donghak peasant army's final heroic resistance at the end of the Joseon dynasty. A new museum has been completed, offering a comprehensive look at the storied history of the Namdo Righteous Armies in one location. To mark the museum's opening, the Bulwonbok Taegukgi has returned to its home. Used by Army Commander Go Kwang-sun in Gure during the early 1900s, the flag bears the poignant inscription Bulwonbok, meaning independence shall be restored soon.
This is a site for a living history education, to remember and pass down the noble spirit of righteous soldiers.
Starting with a sculpture depicting the Dangsado Lighthouse Raid, the event that established Wando's Soando Island as one of the 3 major sites of the anti-Japanese movement, the museum exhibits a total of over 3,000 historical artifacts. Through multi-dimensional exhibits and immersive media, the museum showcases a timeline spanning from the 1555 Ulmyo Webyeon, the first Japanese pirate invasion, through the Imjin and Jeongyu Wars, to the anti-Japanese struggles at the end of the Joseon dynasty. The exterior wall of the Namdo Righteous Army Memorial Museum, named the Space of Metaphor, features a facade panel designed to recreate the metallic roar and shouts of 33,000 Namdo soldiers charging into battle. Integrated with the National Naju Museum, the museum is expected to become a landmark attraction for the year of visiting Naju. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer signed a new defense industry agreement in London on Tuesday to increase the supply of drones and AI technology. During the meeting at 10 Downing Street, President Zelenskyy labeled the regimes in Russia and Iran, quote, brothers in hatred and, quote, brothers in weapons. He urged Western allies to keep their focus on Ukraine despite the conflict in the Middle East. The signed agreement links Ukraine's drone expertise with the UK's manufacturing strength to boost battlefield capabilities. Prime Minister Starmer stated that the international community must ensure President Vladimir Putin does not benefit from shifting global attention. Colombian President Gustavo Petro announced on Tuesday that security forces discovered the remains of 27 people near the country's southern border following recent bombings in the region by Ecuador. The discovery occurred after Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa ordered strikes against criminal organizations operating in the border region. President Noboa said that the Ecuadorian military targeted drug trafficking hideouts located strictly within Ecuadorian territory. President Petro initially questioned the location of the strikes and later clarified that he did not authorize the bombings on the Colombian side. The Congo Republic's Electoral Commission on Tuesday declared President Denis Sassou Nguesso the winner of the national election with 95% of the vote. This victory grants the 82-year-old incumbent a new 5-year term, extending his tenure that began in 1979. Official data reported voter turnout at 84%, although opposition groups questioned the figures and boycotted the process due to transparency concerns. Sassou Nguesso's closest challenger received less than 2% of the total vote. Under current constitutional rules, this is expected to be the president's final term in office. In the U.S., a suspected meteor fell over the Cleveland area on Tuesday morning, creating a visible fireball and a sonic boom that shook residential buildings. The American Meteor Society documented sightings of the object from Wisconsin to Maryland at approximately 9 a.m. local time. Experts from the National Weather Service in Cleveland confirmed that they felt vibrations from the atmospheric entry but found no immediate evidence of fallen debris. While small meteors enter the atmosphere daily, the brightness of this event allowed security cameras to capture the descent in daylight.
Most regions woke up to spring rain this morning. And as for rainfall, mountainous regions on Jeju Island could see over 60 millimeters and 10 to 30 millimeters for the southern coast. But most of the central areas will get 5 to 10 millimeters of lighter rain. But even with the rain, air quality is still a bit of a concern for central regions. Not to mention, yesterday's dust coverage brought itchy eyes and sore throats to many. And today's rain will help clear things out in the southern regions, but dust will stick around a bit longer for central parts of Korea. And along with rain and cloudy skies, afternoon highs will be 4 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday, getting up to 11 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Taegukgi only gets up to 12 degrees. And once the rain moves out by the evening, we're looking at sunnier skies returning tomorrow. But with that, classic spring temperature swings will continue in most parts of Korea.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
How to survive in Korea. 1 room, So, you're surviving in Korea? If you've signed a contract for a one-room, obviously you're a pro. But the real deal begins now. Step 1. Housewarming. No need to buy toilet paper, diffusers or hand soap. You'll get them soon enough as housewarming gifts. And some are bound to pile up. There's nothing better to serve your guests than milpaeyu nabe. If you have Korean friends coming over, don't forget the extra garlic. Step 2. Garbage disposal. With great power comes great responsibility. You've had a good time, so let's get to work. It might be tempting to sweep everything into a trash can, but you have to separate your garbage. Not bothered? Beware that negligence is punished with a fine or public humiliation. Step 3. Drying rack. You're excited to live alone in Korea, but the fate of these items, hanger, storage, or a hanger. Go get fresh coffee outside. Jogging doesn't cost anything, and nothing beats instant rice. But keep one item around so that you don't get too lonely. Step 4. Pros of living alone. No mum. Cons of living alone. No mum. A new towel doesn't magically appear. You have to do the laundry regularly. If anyone gives a towel as a souvenir, take it. Get rid of mold immediately. Don't be lazy with the vacuum cleaner. Housework is an endless affair. Overwhelmed? Give your mum a call and thank her for everything she's done. Did you survive in your one room? Wait, you have an unwanted visitor. Call someone you fancy. Could be the right person for the job.
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the State of Seoul summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Wednesday, March 18th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Brooke.
Hello, thank you for having me.
For coming in. Also, Key's with us.
Good morning.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're in the middle of the work week, and if you felt like your wallet is thinner than usual this week, you're definitely not alone. In this era of high inflation, every trip to the grocery store, every utility bill, even a simple cup of coffee seems to cost more than it did just months ago. And for many, cutting back is no longer a choice, it's a necessity. So the question is, what areas do you try to spend less on, Brooke?
Well, I did notice yesterday when I was going to order delivery that one of my favorite foods had gone up by a couple of dollars. So I do think we're all kind of feeling that. So personally, I try to cut back on certain things so that I can have money for the things that I really enjoy, like skins in video games or my favorite, Labubu's.
That is so cute.
This is another thing I spent money on that maybe I didn't necessarily need to, but it's something that I like. So in order to have the funds for those kinds of fun purchases, I have to be sure that I don't spend too much in other areas. So I do try to be as frugal as I can in my daily life. For example, I don't buy clothing very often. And if I buy or I make food, I can make it last a really long time. I portion it out, and I love leftovers, so nothing goes to waste. I'm also a big fan of searching out sales and discounts. So whenever I'm searching for a product, I do a ton of research and I try to find the cheapest option that's also the best quality for that price. So that's how I can manage to spend money on fun, cute things like that.
It's so funny and also so sad how relatable that is, that you have to pick and choose.
Yes.
What about you, Key?
Well, my wallet has never been fat, it's always been thin. So literally everything I can, I try to cut it down, especially with my kid growing. And used to spend a lot on socializing with people, going out, having drinks with friends and my seniors or juniors, buying good food and expensive liquors, and my toys, of course, lots of Legos. But nowadays I try to spend less, and even with cooking, cooking used to be my meditation. So I spend a lot of time and I spend a lot on ingredients, but nowadays I spend less on ingredients. No more Hanu or Korean beef, no more truffles or caviar. Just anything that would fill up my stomach would be enough for me, and just gonna go on a diet.
I mean, it's really telling how even something as personal as cooking, which used to be a form of relaxation, is now shaped by financial pressure. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. It almost feels like we've been living with high prices forever. From groceries to rent to a simple night out, the cost of everyday life keeps climbing, and for many, cutting back has become the new normal. In fact, the areas where people are tightening the belts are creating entirely new trends, including more people choosing to opt out of traditional weddings altogether. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how people are saving money, the small but meaningful joys they're holding onto, and the smarter spending strategies helping them navigate this high-cost era. Just as we saw in a video, high prices are reshaping not just spending habits, but life's biggest milestones. So one of the most striking shifts that is happening around these days is our weddings. So how are millennials and Gen Zs creating new trends to fight inflation?
Sure. So one of the biggest trends making headlines right now is no wedding phenomena. So it goes beyond just simply scaling down the ceremonies. More couples are choosing not having wedding at all. In fact, a recent survey found out that 4 out of 10 people said that they would be open to foregoing a wedding ceremony entirely as long as both partners agree. There are several factors behind this shift, but the most significant one is, of course, the cost. Wedding expenses have surged dramatically. For instance, the average cost per guest for wedding halls in Gangnam area, this is southern part of Seoul, has recently exceeded 90,000 won, nearly double what it was before the COVID pandemic. And when talking about a prestigious hotel, the minimum started at 200,000 won, but now is well over 250,000 won, adding burden to the couples. When you add the venue rental fee, paste, photography packages, and the so-called sudume, or studio dress makeup bundles. Total cost can easily reach tens of millions of won. And as a result, a growing number of millennials and Gen Z couples are deciding to make it more sense to invest that money into their honeymoon or housing rather than spending all in a single day.
So skipping the ceremony altogether, that's a dramatic shift from tradition. But when a single day can cost that much money, it's no surprise priorities are changing. And this isn't just happening in Korea. Similar movements are emerging overseas. So how are other countries seeing people also opt out of wedding ceremonies altogether, Brooke?
Yes, it is happening in other places. In fact, a similar trend started in the U.S. a few years ago, where many couples began having what are called micro weddings. So what this means is that they invite fewer than about 50 guests in order to reduce costs. And some people are also buying wedding dresses or tuxedos online at lower prices because, as we know, a wedding dress can really be one of the biggest expenses of a wedding. Some people are even using secondhand items to cut down on that expense. Rings are another example of something that can really hurt your wallet. So recently, lab-grown diamonds have become a popular and more affordable option. And then taking us to Japan, there are similar trends being seen there as well. It's called nashikon, where couples simply register their marriage without holding a formal wedding ceremony. And this reminds me of courthouse weddings in the United States, where you just go to the court and you get whatever paperwork you need, but there's no fanfare, there's no huge ceremony. People in the U.S. also go to Vegas sometimes for a very, quick and affordable wedding. So we are seeing younger people turn to these more affordable options rather than the huge weddings that can really be a hard hit financially.
And you also see celebrities, they're doing it for different reasons, obviously, do that as well. It seems fun. So from micro weddings to lab-grown diamonds, it's clear that practicality is replacing extravagance across different cultures. But of course, trends are one thing, but personal choices can be a bit different. So would you personally consider not having a wedding?
Well, I've already done it, so I can't go back and change my past, but I would still do some sort of ceremony. I did actually consider having a small wedding, and I got married before the COVID, but still the cost was very, very expensive. And when I was considering having a small wedding, the problem was making a guest list, who I was going to invite or not. So I ended up having a big wedding, like having 700, 800 guests. But then luckily I had some help in the sponsorships, so I didn't have to pay for a dress or makeup or tuxedo, picture shoots, the venue. But I would respect it if anyone chooses not to have a wedding at all, because for the wedding, it means something more than that.
Yeah, I think obviously sponsorships aren't an option for everyone. I think in a lot of cases, people have to pick and choose. Exactly. Are we going to invite everyone we want, or are we going to have a smaller wedding? So is a small ceremony, in your opinion, worth it, or would you rather skip it altogether for practicality?
Well, I don't know if I've even met 700 or 800 people in my lifetime. So I think my wedding would be quite small. I keep a small circle of friends, and my family's pretty small too. So I don't think it would be that expensive for me. And also, I've been dreaming of my wedding since I was a little girl. So for me, I don't think I could skip the ceremony. And for some people, that is the case. A wedding to them is this sort of once-in-a-lifetime event that they've been fantasizing about. So even if it's a small micro wedding, they might still want to have that ceremony just to celebrate with their family and close friends. But for others, skipping the ceremony and putting that money towards something more practical, like traveling or a home, might make more sense, because like we've been talking about, the cost of a wedding can sometimes be the same or even more than buying something like a house to live in. So I think both choices can be valid. It all really depends on what matters most to the couple and if they both agree on what their long-term goals are.
Right, there's so many things to spend on, and everything's so expensive, so you really have to pick and choose. So weddings aren't the only area where millennials and Gen Zs are rethinking big spending. So what other spending habits are changing, Keith?
Well, another notable shift is that we're seeing younger generations are not buying brand new cars. Instead, they're buying used ones. In fact, the share of new car registrations last year fell its the lowest level in a decade. What's particularly interesting is the contrast across the age group. While car owners in their 60s and 70s are accounting for the growing number and share of new car purchases each year, the proportion among the young people in their 20s and 30s has continued to decline, hitting a 10-year low. There are a couple of key reasons behind this trend. First, the financial burden. The car prices have risen significantly, making it increasingly difficult for younger consumers to afford a new vehicle, which is very true. And at the same time, the rapid expansion of car sharing services is changing the way people think about the ownership. For many, the younger generation, access is becoming more important than ownership, reducing the need to buy a car altogether. You don't have to worry about the parking. It's way more practical and economical because you can book the car whenever you need it. And you can get easy access. All you need to do is just book it on your smartphone, so it's much easier.
Right. So, I mean, it's a huge generational shift from owning a car as a status symbol to seeing as more of a burden financially. And even everyday spending habits are evolving. So is this frugality turning into kind of like a lifestyle movement these days?
Definitely. We're seeing in the United States, there's this trend called the No Buy Year Challenge, and it's gained a lot of attention since last year. It's similar to Korea's No Spending Challenge, and the goal is to avoid unnecessary purchases for an entire year except for essential items, which sounds...
No la-boo-boos.
No la-boo-boos. It sounds like a very challenging idea, but it's to reduce impulse buying, and it's meant to make sure that you focus only on what you truly need as the cost of living continues to rise. And we're seeing a similar mindset spreading among younger consumers in Korea as well. So if you take a look at the screen, I'll take you through some numbers here. According to the 2024 Korean Consumption Trends Outlook by the Korea Broadcast Advertising Corporation, about 81% of people say they are limiting spending to essential items and avoiding unnecessary purchases, while nearly 90% say practical consumption is more important than spending simply to show off. This is also known as conspicuous consumption. And these results show how younger consumers are shifting toward more practical and intentional spending habits. I was pretty surprised by how high those numbers are. It's pretty encouraging. I think a lot of younger people have different priorities these days.
So it's not just about cutting back, it's about redefining what truly matters to young people. In a high-cost era, practical consumption is becoming a value statement, not really seen as a sacrifice. So we also want to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, even if you need to save money, what can't you give up? So here's what the results showed. So a clear majority, 70%, say they refuse to compromise on good, high-quality food, showing that well-being and everyday satisfaction still come first. Meanwhile, 13% say they can't give up travel, valuing experiences despite financial pressure. 10% continue to prioritize spending on appearance, such as clothes and accessories, while 7% say staying up to date with the latest IT devices is something they're not willing to sacrifice. So for me, like 70% choosing food, I am personally not surprised at all, and I am probably in that group. So I personally think you can come back on shopping or delay upgrading your phone, but compromise on what you eat every single day just hits different. It also seems really sad. And to gain a broader perspective on this, we're going to talk to a university student from a different country. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Julia, a university student from Japan who likes to find practical ways to save money. So hello, Julia. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So Julia, how are you cutting living costs at this time of high inflation?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm overly particular about it, but I do try to stick to simple habits. So, for example, turning off the lights when I leave a room or avoiding letting water run unnecessarily. Also, in terms of grocery shopping, I like to purchase my fruits and vegetables at produce markets because it's more fresh. But at the same time, I think it tends to be cheaper than normal supermarkets. And one final thing that I would like to say is that I enjoy cooking, so I cook most of my meals at home, which might naturally help me keep these daily expenses low.
So what money-saving trends are popular among Gen Z in Japan?
I've noticed these young individuals have become more careful about how they spend money. Some of my friends would walk longer distances to go to a cheaper supermarket, or even choose to walk to their destination if it's just one train stop away to cut on transportation costs. But as you mentioned, I've seen the trend of nashgon, where people choose not to have wedding ceremonies, and I think it reflects how the younger generation sees and thinks about these traditional events and expenses as they become more selective of what they define as necessary to them. And similarly, instead of owning a car, many young people are turning to car sharing services where they can rent a vehicle nearby only when they need it, rather than committing to purchasing one. But at the same time, I think it's not just about saving money, because I've also seen this shift toward trying to expand or increase their money. And so investment programs that are easy to start have become more popular amongst young Japanese individuals. I think the trend is not just about cutting money, but being more thoughtful or intentional in how money is managed.
Well, I'm very inspired by you saying that you cook at home almost every day. I think that's a great tip for anyone trying to cut back a little bit. So what other money-saving tips would you personally like to share?
I think one simple tip is to build small habits that add up. I carry a reusable water bottle. I've noticed that a lot of my friends did that in the US when I was studying in the US last year, but not as much amongst my friends in Japan. And it ends up being both cost effective and environmentally friendly. So I'd recommend making this a habit. Also, for example, making a shopping list before going out, because it helps prevent impulsive purchases. And when it comes to shopping for food, maybe opting for private label products could help. And for non-essential items, maybe buying secondhand items is a great option, not just for saving money, but because it has become a more popular and sustainable choice amongst young people. Another point I would like to mention is tracking your spending. So with cashless payments becoming more common, yes, it's definitely more convenient, but it's easy to lose track of how much you're actually spending. So using a budgeting app or keeping a simple expense log might help. And finally, one thing I would like to note is in Japan, although there are slight movements towards raising wages, I see that many individuals are concerned that these raising prices are outpacing the wage growth. And I guess in such an environment, it is easy to feel anxious about spending or the future of your finances. But I think it's important to remember that budgeting isn't solely about restricting yourself completely. And at the end of the day, there are necessary expenses, which are things that we can't simply stop buying even if the prices increase. So I think the key is to allocate your money wisely, making thoughtful and balanced decisions with your spending while still allowing yourself to enjoy life. And personally, I would like to see the optimistic side and think of it more as smart budgeting rather than just cutting costs.
I fully agree with pretty much everything you said today. I think it's so important to adopt certain habits and implement them in your daily lives to really cut back costs. And also, it's very relatable in Korea too. It doesn't feel like our salaries is keeping up with the pace that the prices are rising, which just can be frustrating. But I think adopting these habits into our lives can be really helpful. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your tips today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just heard how young people in Japan are navigating rising prices, from cutting back daily costs to embracing new saving trends and sharing practical tips. But saving doesn't always mean giving everything up. So how are millennials and Gen Z still finding small joys despite tight budgets, Ki?
Sure. So what's interesting is how the MZ generation is redefining the term consumption. Rather than making large, committed, long-term purchases like homes or cars, many are choosing to opt out of those commitments altogether. Instead, they're finding small satisfaction, more immediate form of spending, things like 빵지순례 or bakery pilgrimages, or what's often referred as a 제철 core or seasonal core experiences. In other words, it's about choosing highly concentrated, high-impact moments of joy and enjoyment, even if they are brief. We see a similar pattern in lifestyle as well. For example, even if they are not drinking alcohol, many still want that atmosphere, so the non-alcohol market is getting bigger, and the phenomenon reflects move away from ownership or obligations towards it's moving toward the experience and emotional value.
So we're actually going to talk about season accord tomorrow on the show, so tune in if you're interested. So that's really interesting. Instead of big lifetime purchases, they're choosing small but high impact experiences. So it's less about ownership and more about emotional return on spending. And beyond what they buy, even how they evaluate products is changing. So how are young people becoming, I guess, smarter, more analytical consumers, Brooke?
Well, I think our guest really exemplified that with how she was saying, you know, make a list before you go shopping. Another tip I would say is don't go shopping while hungry, because then you might make more impulsive purchases. But yeah, the trend is what's happening is that people aren't just looking for the cheapest option anymore, and they are just smarter when they're shopping. They're trying to really understand and digest the price structure behind the product. So why are they priced the way they are? They want to find items that offer real value without having to pay for those unnecessary markups. And that's why things like high quality dupes or private brand products from retailers or even well-made items from smaller companies are becoming more popular. It's not all about just the brand name anymore. It's about the quality. And people often share their discoveries online, and that has become a new kind of consumption culture among younger generations, where people like our guest are sharing their money-saving tips with each other. So the priority has become more about, you know, being frugal and helping each other be frugal.
Right. So it's not just about frugality, it's strategic consumption. So young people aren't just chasing this cheapest option, but the most rational value. And this brings us to a bigger question in this high-cost era. So what does truly wise spending, Ki, in your opinion, look like today?
So know your limit, know how much you can actually spend, and stop looking at the social media because you know, you end up comparing your life with others, but then don't compare your life with others because your life is just as beautiful. It's important to save money, but at the same time, it's important to enjoy your life as well. Enjoy your moment. Small things in your everyday life can change how much you could appreciate your life as a whole. So it's all about the harmony, I think.
I like what you said about social media because I feel like in this era, it's so easy to compare yourself.
Yes.
Right.
This person's having this kind of wedding, they're living in this kind of home. It's so easy to compare, but don't fall into that. So do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and a lot of times those social media posts aren't even real, right? You're not seeing the real life. So definitely remind yourself of that. And harmony, I think, is a beautiful word. Another word I'd like to say is balance. I think that's really the key. It's important to save money, but if you cut back too much, then you feel too restricted, too limited, and you feel like you can't really enjoy your life either. I love Labubus. If I want to buy one, I'm going to buy one, but don't go crazy with it. And also, instead of worrying about what other people think about what you have, it's better to spend intentionally on the things that truly matter to you while being more careful with the rest. I think finding that balance is hard. It's not easy, but that is the smartest way to manage spending in economical times like these.
So in times like this, in a time of rising prices, saving money is no longer just about cutting back. It's about choosing wisely. From skipping large-scale traditions to embracing small, meaningful spending, priorities are clearly shifting. And ultimately, smart consumption may be less about how much you spend and more about what you truly value. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. When News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Brooke. I
had a lot of fun today. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. And also Ki.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And hopefully this reminded you that in times like this, smart spending can be the new luxury.
Ooh, I like that.
We are
News Generation.